Tropical Storm Matthew is getting a little bit stronger in the Eastern Caribbean Sea. I'm Mike Naso from the IPR Tropical Video Update page here on YouTube. With the latest on the tropics, we're going to focus solely on Matthew, which is the main game in town. When we take a look at the entire Atlantic, at least the Caribbean and the Central Atlantic, you can see that there is Matthew, and the center of circulation is a little bit on the western edge of that convection. So if it were right in the center here, it'd be a lot more foreboding, but it is still getting sheared. You can see an upper level low here. All of this is going to play in as it continues to track to the south of this deep layer ridge. So we'll get into all that. We'll get into some of the models and what the system's going to do. But yes, at this time, to be honest with you, I'm not all that impressed with its presentation. I'd like to see that shear decrease a little bit before putting too much stock into it, but the official forecast does have it becoming a powerful hurricane in the Western Caribbean. Now, Dr. Phil Klotzbach from Colorado State University is a great guy. I haven't had a chance to talk to him in a couple of years, but he does tremendous forecasting every year, and he posted this on his Twitter feed, actually, the tracks of all the Atlantic hurricanes that reached major hurricane strength during the month of October. And we could see, Joaquin in this region here. I see Joan from 88. Here's Hurricane Wilma. And, of course, Iris down here, 2001. That was a nasty little one to track back in October of '01. So we do get major hurricanes. We do definitely get major hurricanes in the month of October. And a lot of them do end up taking some kind of a northeastward turn, like we're likely to see with Matthew, should it become a major hurricane. Right now, it is not expected to be, but close enough to where you're going to want to keep an eye on it. Trust me, especially if it gets up towards 105 miles an hour. That is a potent hurricane, not too shabby at all. Here's the latest as of 11 p.m. It was at 13.9 north, 63.1 west. Winds were 65. Is moving west at about 14 or 15 miles an hour, but the pressure is still very high, up at about 1,004 millibars. And again, the center is displaced to the west of all that deep convection. However, as time goes on, Matthew is expected to become a hurricane, probably in about 24 to 36 hours, and then be in an unfavorable location for development. Now, we've seen certain storms like Hurricane Felix back in 2007. Felix strengthened very quickly in this area. However, many storms just can't get going. They suck in some dry air from South America. We think that Matthew will strengthen slowly but steadily. Come Friday night into Sunday morning over the weekend, we should start to see it round the ridge and then intensify more. And the track here through time does take it between Jamaica and Haiti into eastern Cuba as a powerful hurricane, Category 2, by Monday night. But remember, this is 5 days out. So there is a lot of changes in location, and it could be over Hispaniola, it could be over the Bahamas, it could be off the north coast of Cuba, it could be way down here in the southwest Caribbean. There is no telling where this thing might go right now, and that's why anybody in these locations has to keep an eye out. You can see Dominica, Martinique, you guys have been pounded with tropical storm winds, but as the system moves off to the west, those winds will decrease. And we see the model guidance is in very good agreement. Matthew is expected to pretty much move straight west, maybe even a little west-southwest. You can see the UK Met getting it way down here towards like 12, 13 north. And then all of a sudden, look at that jaunt almost due north. So we've seen this before. As I showed you in October, it can happen. We could see this system get pretty far southwest into the Caribbean and still get lifted straight out. That is some very good, tight model guidance there. So if I were a betting man, I'd say that we will see this thing turn around the side of the ridge. And remember, with the troughiness getting deeper as we go further into fall, we could see some pretty drastic turns. Nevertheless, it is very important where does it turn. Because if it gets too far west in the Caribbean, it may wind up taking a much more northeastern track by the time it gets caught up than if it gets pretty far to the north and then eventually turns to the north. So many variables here. You'll want to watch it. If you live in the United States, Cape Hatteras, Jacksonville, New England, keep an eye on it. Anytime there's a powerful hurricane in the Western Caribbean, you're going to want to keep an eye on it, just because you never know what these systems can do. There are the ensembles, and you can see in the longer range, some of them are flirting with the idea of North Carolina or New England, but it's still anybody's guess. Right now, there is still a very strong possibility that it could always take a northeast turn, even between Bermuda and Cape Hatteras, but that's way too far range. Right now, the best bet is right in this area here over the next 5 days. So this is way too early to speculate. Now there's the satellite on the infrared, and as I mentioned before, I'm not very impressed with it. If you look very carefully, notice these clouds bursting right towards the system. See that? Watch right there. Boom. That is still wind shear. This system is still getting sheared. It is way too flat on its western side right now. That is not favorable for development. And if the center of circulation is off in this region, most of the convection is still lopsided. That is not a favorable sign for development. However, that is a favorable sign for a 65 mile per hour tropical storm. And given that that convection is bursting, that's a sign of continued development. Not anything rapid, but certainly some development. And again, you can see that wind shear is what's really causing it harm. Right here, it's strong wind shear decreasing over the top of it. By the time it starts to turn in about 3 to 5 days, it appears that it'll be a little more favorable for development. Remember, Hurricane Sandy a few years ago had the same problem. It couldn't get going until the end between Jamaica and Haiti and eastern Cuba, and it was able to become a major hurricane. So there is still the chance that it stays rather weak and then comes back. I remember Tomas back in 2010 did the same thing. It became a hurricane, a Category 2, very quickly, fizzled out, and then came back to a hurricane again after a couple of days of unfavorable conditions. So we'll wait and see on the wind shear front exactly what happens. As far as the sea surface temperatures, nothing to worry about there. Very warm water. In fact, extremely warm in the region where we expect Matthew to go over the next several days. So those conditions are not unfavorable for development, should 3 to 5 days pan out. But in the immediate short term, it's still suffering a little bit. So what's the game plan here? What's the story with it? Well, you can see a couple of features here. We have an upper level low here north of Hispaniola. We have two upper lows. One's off your screen. Here's one. The other one's further right off your screen. And those are actually helping to kind of give a little vent to the tropical storm. The center of the storm is a little displaced, as I mentioned before, because of that wind shear. However, as you could see, trophiness digging through the east coast. There's a ridge of high pressure steering Tropical Storm Matthew. So expect Matthew to continue to take a track almost like that and then get pushed north. And how exactly that turn occurs and where it occurs and how strong the storm is when it occurs is all going to be critical. It is far too early to make the determination. Right now, something to the west, slightly west-southwest, then a gradual bend, and then something like that appears what we're looking at. We'll look in a couple of days and see how valid that line is. But as of right now, that's what the Hurricane Center's thinking, and that appears to be the best bet. But as they remind you, it could be further to the east, it could be further to the west. Anybody in the Caribbean Sea, the Bahamas, and even points north need to keep an eye on Tropical Storm Matthew because it is forecast to become a powerful hurricane. I'm Mike Naso from IPR. I'll see you next time as we continue to watch Matthew in the Atlantic Basin.